Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's LIC Europe's webinar. It is titled Body Condition Scoring at Mating and the link it has to better repro performance. This is a European-wide webinar, so whether you're tuned in from Ireland, the UK or mainland Europe or even further afield, thank you for joining us. I'm John Tobin, Systems Manager here at LIC Ireland, and I will be the facilitator for the evening. LIC has a long tradition of advising its farmers on how to improve their repro performance, both in New Zealand and across the world. When you are looking at New Zealand's average calving interval of 370 days and an 82% calving rate, New Zealand is leading the way. With fertility BVs accounting for only 10% of your repro performance, we need to make sure we're getting the other 90% right, which of course is down to management. These areas could be nutrition or heat detection or heifer growth or even body condition scoring. Now when we do talk about repro performance, we are talking about the ability to get your cows back in calf and achieve a high 6-week in calf rate. So tonight we'll be looking at some of those key areas of management and examine the role they play in Joe and Kathleen's herd. So the format for tonight is that we will have first Lucy Coleman and then Joyce White, and they will be talking about body condition score and the role it played on the Kerwin's farm. Both Lucy and Joyce are based in New Zealand. Lucy is a repro solutions advisor for LIC, and her role involves supporting farmers in New Zealand to improve their repro performance. Joyce is our international technical manager. She herself has come through the share milking route and now owns her own family farm with her husband Gary in the Waikato. Her own farm's repro shows that she can walk the walk as well as talk the talk. Some of you might have already met Joyce as she's been to Ireland in the UK in the past to talk and present about repro performance. In the second part tonight we have David Power, who is our senior breeding advisor here in Ireland. David has a master's in animal breeding, and as well as that, he is dairy farming in Watford. And we have Joe and Kathleen Kerwin. They are our dairy farmers close to the Horse and Jockey in County Tipperary, right here in Ireland. For tonight, Joe will be doing the talking, but it is very much a partnership between Joe and Kathleen. David, Joe, and I will go through the herd improvement options for the coming year. These options are available to us because of the improved repro performance on the Kerwin's farm. We will present everything, warts and all, in tonight's presentation. Both sessions should be about 25 minutes each, followed by a live questions and answers session. First, a bit of housekeeping. We have enabled our Ask a Question feature, so if you have any questions, just pop them in there. If you miss anything, don't worry, we are recording this session and we will be making it available in the next week or so. It will also be available as a podcast. So without further delay, over to you, Lucy.
Right, thank you, John. So as John mentioned, my name is Lucy. I'm a reproduction solutions advisor at LIC based in New Zealand. I have a PhD in animal science with a high degree of familiarity with the dairy beef industry, which I understand Ireland is, along with New Zealand, I hope, leading the way in the world in this area. So I'm going to talk a bit about a piece of work that the reproduction solutions team did this year, looking at the body condition score of New Zealand cows at mating, and then the link that body condition score has to reproduction. So I'm going to cover a bit about the importance of body condition score, then what condition New Zealand cows are in, and how does that condition score relate to reproduction. So body condition score is a measure of the fat reserves and is particularly important in early lactation. So body condition score buffers the peak of energy demand and the caused by the peak of milk supply against feed shortage. So in New Zealand, we are very much a seasonal breeding system. And most of our herds calve in spring to match the pasture growth. So this graph on the right shows the grass growth in green and a milk production curve in orange. When a cow calves, a lot of her internal space has been taken up by a calf, so her rumen isn't at full capacity. It takes a wee while for her rumen to get back to its normal, in New Zealand at least, 200 litres. So during that time, body condition score is part of the buffer because the cow cannot physically eat enough grass to match her energy demand. So body condition score very much indicates energy balance. A rapid condition drop after calving, so losing a lot of weight after calving, can have negative impacts on reproduction through increasing the time to resume cycling, reducing the conception rate, and increasing the risk of health problems, which indirectly affects reproduction. So in New Zealand, we follow the in-calf program, which was developed by Dairy Australia and is now run in New Zealand through Dairy NZ. This program states that there are 8 key management areas which affect reproduction. One of these is body condition score and nutrition. In New Zealand, our body condition score scale is measured on a 1 to 10, which is a bit different from most countries in the world. Ireland and the UK, it's 1 to 5. Australia, it's 1 to 8. So we've got our own targets, which don't quite match up to what you might think with doubling the Irish targets. So at calving, we want our mature cows, so anything that is 4 years and older in their third or greater calving, we want them at a condition score of 5.0. For first and second calvers, because they're still growing, we want them in a higher condition score at 5.5. We don't have particular targets for mating, but we don't want the cows to be losing more than 1 condition score from between calving and mating, which means that we don't want our mature cows any less than a 4 and our first and second calvers any less than a 4.5. So the data we used was individual body condition scores that were recorded in our herd recording software Minder. They were all from spring calving herds in 2019, and these herds all were able to produce a detailed fertility focus report. So fertility focus report is our herd recording reproduction tool run through the in-calf program and requires accurate calving dates, mating dates, and aged pregnancy test data to be included. So we use this level of data because we can accurately age the pregnancies and determine when the cow's conceived. So we looked at the data and found that there was not many records for pre-calving, but there was a lot of records for pre-mating. So we used the nearly 200,000 cows with a body condition score prior to mating. So what condition are New Zealand cows in? So the 4 to 8 year olds, the mature cows, I haven't looked at anything older than 9 because it was a smaller group. So 4 to 8 year olds, on average, they are meeting their target. So their target for mating, we didn't want them any less than a 4.0. So 4.38 is meeting that, with only 7% of cows below a 4, which is great. For 2-year-olds, so first calvers, on average they're meeting their target. We didn't want them to be any less than a 4.5. However, 28%, so nearly a third of our 2-year-olds are below target, which to us indicates that they're not meeting their condition score at calving, or they're losing too much between calving and mating. For our 3-year-olds, so second calvers, they aren't meeting their target on average. We didn't want them anything below a 4.5. With a 4.34, that is too low, and nearly half of the cows are falling behind. So for us, this seems like they're not being set up for calving. They're not meeting their calving targets. So body condition score really is a year-round factor, and the end of lactation in New Zealand is particularly important for meeting those pre-calving targets. So how does this all relate to reproduction? So our key measures of reproduction are the 6-week in-calf rate, or in Ireland, the 6-week pregnancy rate, which is the proportion of cows that got pregnant in the first 6 weeks of mating. And then the not in-calf rate, which is anything that is not recorded pregnant at the end of mating. So these red boxes here highlight the minimum and heifer condition score greater of where we'd like our cows to be. So between a 4.5 and 5 for first and second calvers, and 4 and 4.5 for mature cows. And these coincidentally also highlight the body condition scores for those groups with the best reproductive performance. So cows that were in the recommended less than 1 condition score loss from calving, they had the best reproductive performance. They got back in calf better. So a few takeaway points from my work. The condition score of all of our cows is important. Thinner cows take longer to get back in calf, or they may not get back in calf at all. Particularly in New Zealand, putting in extra effort into the 2 and 3-year-old cows, age groups which have the most cows in them, they are the most populous age groups. Having them at meeting condition score targets will have rewards in reproductive performance, and it will keep those cows in the herd for longer. Dairy NZ recommends condition scoring regularly, with an emphasis on late lactation, so drying cows off at the optimum time for them to gain enough condition to meet their pre-calving targets. Prior to calving, prior to mating, and at the end of mating, which is leading into summer, a period in New Zealand where cows do tend to lose condition score again. That's my talk. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Lucy. It was great to see those insights into the performance in the New Zealand herd and reproductive performance relating to body condition score. Now we're just going to turn our attention to a bit closer to home, looking first at the Irish targets and then in particular at Joe and Kathleen's herd. Joe's done a great deal of work this year getting individual cow body condition score data at 3 times in the season, and also early age pregnancy testing results. And that's enabled us to track the body condition score of his cows through the season, and to also see how they perform by body condition score group. So thank you, Joe, for doing all that work. First of all, let's have a little look at the Irish targets now. The Irish targets are well established, a lot of research in behind them and available from Teagasc. This great slide is from their website and shows the body condition score that we'd be aiming for at different stages of the lactation. So at the moment we are here at in the late lactation phase, and you'll be thinking about getting your cows set up for calving. So at the moment, this time of year, the mean body condition score target is around 3 on the 1 to 5 scale, and there's a range of 2.75 to 3.25. Over the next few weeks, farmers will be working at getting their cows up into the calving range, where we are aiming to have our cows calving down at a body condition score 3 to 3.25. Then cows do tend to lose a bit of weight between calving and mating, and so we see as we move into mating The range has now widened slightly, and we want our cows coming into mating at a condition score of 2.75 to 3.25. Then from that point on, we'd like them to more or less maintain their condition right through to the end of lactation, where we start the whole process again. Now if we turn our attention to Joe and Kathleen's herd at Laurel Lodge, I'd first of all like to draw your attention to the table at the top of the slide. There's quite a bit of information on the slide which I'll take you through now. We can see in the box the New Zealand targets and at calving, pre-calving and pre-mating. Beside them the Irish targets, pre-calving and pre-mating. And then we've got the average of Joe's herd at pre-calving was 3.02, so on average they're on target, and pre-mating 2.93. On average they're on target there too. But averages don't tell the whole story. We like to see the distribution within the herd of body condition score. And so if we look at the graph below, I've plotted the condition score, the number of cows per group across the pre-calving is in the dark colours, so the dark red and the dark green, and then the pre-mating scores are in the pale colours, the pale red and the pale green there. So if we look at the distribution of body condition scores at the start of calving, although on average the herd was 3.02 and on target, there were some cows, a proportion of cows who were slightly too light, and a proportion of cows who were slightly over-conditioned, and there were leaving 47% of the herd in the target range of 3 to 3.25. Then when the condition score of these cows was done again pre-mating, we can see there's been a bit of a shift where both the target band is widened slightly, but we can see that more cows are sitting in the target band here than in the under-conditioned and over-conditioned areas. So now we have, at the start of mating, 92% of the herd are actually on target. We also saw some body condition score loss between calving and mating, not a lot, at minus 0.09 of a body condition score on the Irish scale. So I was curious to see which cows were gaining or losing weight and where the shift into the middle categories came from. So I looked at the condition score changes between calving and mating and found that if we look down here in the pale green, 33% of the herd actually maintained their body condition score. And at calving, those girls were averaging 2.9, so just a tad under that target of 3. 23% of the herd actually gained weight between calving and mating, and they gained 0.3 of a body condition score unit, and those girls were on average lighter at calving at 2.69. The biggest group was 44% of cows who lost weight between calving and mating, and which is, as you would expect physiologically with cows. These cows lost 0.35 of a unit, and on average they were the heavier conditioned cows, higher body condition score at 3.29. So that tells us a little bit about where this move came from. Some cows moved up into the band and gained weight, 23%. More cows moved down slightly and ended up in the band, and this is where we get this 92% of the herd are now at condition score target coming into mating. So then let's take a look at how these different body condition score at calving groups performed in 6-week pregnancy rate. So we analysed the condition score of the cows groups, their reproductive performance by body condition score, and we found that the group that were at the Irish targets of 3 to 3.25 at calving were indeed the group with the highest 3-week submission rate, and the highest 6-week pregnancy rate. So what we can see here quite clearly is that the results on farm back up the Irish targets. So I just would like to hand it over to Joe, a little bit of explanation now, please, Joe, about what happened on the farm through as you managed the cows through this whole period.
Okay, Joyce. Thank you. It's quite interesting. During the dry period, silage made in 2000 was slightly less quality than what I would have liked. So that left a proportion of cows slightly under target condition score coming in to calving. But after calving, growth, grass availability and weather was exceptional last spring for a number of weeks, and some of those cows gained a little bit of condition, which is quite unusual. One thing to be done, and we wouldn't have been doing some years ago, we didn't feed any high protein rations in early lactation. We kept the protein in the ration that was fed with the grass to 14% or less, and I think that's important. I think we used to have a habit of feeding 18 or 20% protein rations with grass, and we were burning the fat off of them, and we were reducing their ability to retain body condition score. So I think a combination of poor silage left some of them a little bit under condition coming into calving. After calving, we had exceptional conditions. On top of that, the genetics has changed. So the cow that's calving earlier but isn't killing herself calving or milking in the first 3 months is set up better for holding body condition. I think that's important. The genetics is probably as important as the feed, because we're coming from where we had extreme Holsteins, North American Holsteins. It didn't matter what way we fed them, they lost body condition score at a phenomenal rate after calving because of the amount of volume of milk they were producing.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Joe. I just wondered, why are you chasing a high 6-week calving rate? Does it really matter?
Yes, it does, yeah. My history is coming from high yielding cows quite a number of years ago, where we're chasing volume. Volume in the extreme end of things, high volumes of milk left us with cows that were hard to mind. They had a lot of veterinary assistance requirement to keep them healthy. We weren't able to keep their body condition score right. So then we started to breed to have less milk coming from the cows, or genetically less milk. And we had at one stage thought that we would be reducing our overall production from the herd. But quite the opposite, because coming with genetically less volume in the cows came with a tighter and tighter calving pattern. So we had more days in milk coming from the herd. So we've actually very little reduction in volume and very, very little reduction in kilos of solids, purely because we have a lot more days in milk. So I used to work in the genetics industry. Lads used to come in and to us at open days and they say, oh my God, I have to breed more milk into my cows. And the first thing I'd ask them is, have your cows calving in April, May and June? And they say yes. Well, then you don't need more milk in your cows, you need more fertility in your cows. So if a June cow was calving in February, she'd have February, March, April, May and half of June, which is 4.5 months milk produced before that cow calved. So we're beginning to now see that the genetics isn't just genetics, it's a whole combination of cow management. It all comes together to give us more production from less stressed cows. The cows aren't stressed from producing these huge volumes of milk in early lactation that was impacting their calving, which was impacting their calving because their body condition score was falling asunder after calving. So it's a combination of all those things, I think, Joyce.
Well, that's great. Now, you've alluded to having a faster calving pattern there, which is great. But on top of that, already, the improvement you've already seen, this year you've had another good jump in your 6-week pregnancy rate, which is great to see. We've talked about the body condition score management part of that, but are there any other things that you've done this year on the farm that have made a difference?
I suppose we have, yes. We run a farm. Myself and my wife do most of the work with a little bit of help in the springtime. So with 250 plus cows, heat detection was becoming a problem. So this year we bought collars. We bought these what would you call it, health and reproduction collars. We bought the NEDAP ones. They took a lot of work out of heat detection and made the heat detection very accurate. We're very, very happy with that. We think that's a big help. We're seeing that the reproduction is a cycle. The tighter you get your calving pattern, it's easier it gets to keep it tight because you have more days between calving and AI. Before, when we'd start AI on the farm, we'd have a bunch of cows in the shed, not calved, looking out over the gate at us when we'd be AI in our first cows. So those ladies had no chance of going in calf in the first 6 weeks. Now we're finishing calving before we start AI, which is the way it should be, but up to now we weren't able to do that. And if everything goes according to plan, we should have a month of a break between calving and AI the coming season if everything goes according to plan. And that's a huge bonus in trying to get a tight 6-week calving. So it all happens in stages. You won't fix fertility in 1 year or 2 years. I think we discussed it before. We started with, when we had the Holstein, we would have 25% plus empty. We'd have a 15-week breeding season. We went down to 20. We started to get more into looking at body condition, everything. We got it down within a couple of years to 13%. We got stuck at 13% empty for about 2 years, if not 3 years. We got it down last year to 10, and we got it down to 7% empty this year. So it hasn't been a quick fix, but it is fixing. Now, I'm quite sure we'll get a year where something will go wrong, but we've been on an improving scale for the past 7 or 8 years, really, in fertility. And we are where we were hoping to get to, which is around 7% in 12 weeks. Maybe we'll even tighten that up a bit, maybe, and try and get 9% in maybe 9 weeks. That would be my target, but not yet.
Well, that's great. I presume that you've got plenty of choice now about which cows you're going to keep and cows you might be going to sell, which will enable you to drive your herd improvement even further. So I wondered, Joe, if I could hand you over to talk with John and David about how you're going to make decisions from here on. Now you've got lots of choices in front of you. If you could talk us through a few of your options and the considerations that you're taking into account in deciding what to do with your stock numbers and stock sales in the weeks and months ahead. So Joe, I'm just curious about this group of cows down here. I know it's only a small number at 13% of your cows that were at a condition score of 2.5, and we've got to be careful with numbers when we get down to very small numbers of cows, but they do stand out to me a little bit in that they had, even though they were lighter, they had a good 3-week submission rate and 6-week pregnancy rate. Can you tell me a bit about those?
Yeah, well, those 13 cows, Joyce, were mostly made up of our lame group, and our lame group were put on once a day milking. And in the last 3 years, our lame group, who would have lower body condition score than the average of the herd, have had, in 3 years, have had 100% conception rate. And they're the group that should not go in calf easily, but once a day just turned it around. And I think, talking to guys who are keen on improving fertility, I think all lighter cows and late cows should be put on once a day if you want to get a very good 6-week in calf rate. And a few of my friends followed my advice this year, and they've got really good results as well. So for the few gallons of milk that you will sacrifice, you'll keep your cow in the herd for another year. So it's not a sacrifice at all. It's a very, very good financial decision to make, is to put those late calvers and those with poor body condition score, sometimes because their poor body condition score is because they have sore or tender feet. Put them on once a day, don't be afraid to do it. Leave them in a paddock nearby and you'll get well rewarded in conception rate, and those cows will be in the herd the year after, calving at a time where you want them to calve.
Oh, that's great, Joe. Thank you very much for sharing your farm experience with us all.
Okay, so thank you, Lucy and Joyce, for the presentation. It was good to see the importance of body condition score as presented by Lucy, but to have Joyce also present how it was relevant and it was applied in real life on Joe's farm. It's very good to see that. I like the fact that the 6-week calf rate, and it said the whole thing is imported from Australia, but New Zealand seen the value of it. They weren't too shy to use it, took it on board, and they've seen the results of that. So I really enjoy when I see something like that where one country is willing to learn from another country. Also, I like that part where you had 200,000 cows with body condition scores at mating, like just phenomenal data to work with and easy to make decisions, easy to know what works and doesn't work when you have data like that. Just want to mention also that all body condition scoring 3 times done this year on Joe's farm was done by Cork Grassland Consultancy, so it was done independently of myself or Joe, just to be consistent and have that information presented as independent. And I like then Joe's point there of instead of chasing production, he was chasing days of milk, which funny enough got in production in the end. So next we will move on to David, Joe and myself. We will work through the herd improvement options Joe has this year. He has these options because of improved repro performance and also decision to milk cows next year. So we'll start off with the first slide. So the current scenario at Joe's at the moment is he has 200, we have the figures there on the screen, 274 cows. Our dairy stock, excluding the empty cows, and it's consisting of 220 cows. So that's 54, and also 54 2020 barn heifers. We've already sold 30 2020 barn heifers just in the last spring of 2021. So the worst of those heifers are gone. So the stock that's left, those heifers that are left, are very good heifers indeed. So in 2021, Joe was milking 250 cows. In 2022, Joe and Kathleen will like to move to 220 cows. So first, I just want to start by asking Joe, why the move from 250 cows to about 220 cows?
There's quite a number of reasons for that. The main reason would be that we said on purposely we would try a very high stocking rate for a number of years and evaluate it on profit, and it worked very well where concentrates and fertilizer were relatively low compared to a rising milk price, and profits were very good, resulting from a very high stocking rate. The future doesn't look as good now with the correlation between the costs versus the price of milk. Price of milk has remained quite good, but costs are beginning to go through the roof, fertilizer in particular, and I think grain prices will follow it. Now, when you're heavily stocked, then we were struggling with a heavy stocking rate to stay within the nitrates directives as is enforced by the EU. So a combination of the cost beginning to go out of kilter with the price of milk, we were struggling to be able to stay within the nitrates directives, and we were always under pressure. We have dry land, and the last couple of summers were dry. We were just barely staying ahead of drought all the time. We have decided, even though the 2 years have been good financially, we have decided to reduce the pressure on the farm and would also reduce the labour pressure as well. So I suppose labour, nitrates and costs going out of kilter with the price of milk would be the 3 main reasons that we think it would be prudent now to reduce some of the stock. It's also a good time to sell the stock. There's a good demand there still at the moment, and I suppose they're the main reasons driving our decision to probably go back to around 220 cows milking.
Yeah, look, sounds like sound reasons there, Joe, for making that decision. Talk then with that, when your decision go from, I suppose, 250, 220 cows, then it gives us an opportunity to sell some stock and to reshape what the herd could be, and gives us some options. David, do you want to take us through those options?
Yeah. So I suppose we're looking into Joe's herd first. Obviously we pulled out, so was the lame cows or the poor other cows or the high cell count cows. So I think this worked out around 12 cows. So this brought us down to 273 viable cows, I suppose you would call them, that would be sold. So looking into it, there was 21 cows calving after the 8th of April. So I suppose essentially these were cows that nearly had to go because they're April calving cows. Your cows are going to have problems getting in calf in their 6 weeks. Cows are going to have to put on once in April. So essentially by doing that, that will give Joe a full month off before breeding starts. And all them animals will essentially have 275 to 280 days of milk, assuming they're dried off by the 22nd of December. Then I suppose selection pressure then was probably applied. So we looked within herd. So we went into the milk recordings. So the average production for the third lactation plus was 564. So kind of we gave a 5% variance on this. So any mature cow third lactation plus doing 540 kilos of solids or less was pulled out. Then the second lactation then, so we used say 564 again, took 90% of that on a 5% variance. That brought us down to 475 kilos of solids. So any second calver doing 475 kilos or less was also pulled out. And then any any first calver then doing 75% of the mature cows. So this worked out at bang on 400 kilos of solids. So any first calver doing under 400 kilos of solids was also pulled out. So this ended up with 25 cows that were pulled on production. So that would have given us, say, 46 animals, in-calf animals that could have been sold. So then I suppose the options are there then. Obviously, you could sell all the heifers and cash in. So look, there's 54 heifers there who in the current market would be high value stock. Then again, I suppose selection pressure was applied on them last March when Joe pulled out 30 out of a group of 84. So essentially we moved up the mean, say, we took out the bottom 40% of them heifers. So they moved up the average of that group from, say, you're talking maybe, I think at the time was around 420 solids. It's actually moving up now to around 460 solids. So they're obviously not a group of heifers. You don't want to be moving on. Then the other option then is, I suppose, sell half the cows. So I suppose you could sell the later calving cows. So these are the cows, say, that are calving from the 8th of April on. They're the cows that you're going to have problems with anyway, and you're going to have reduced production. So they're the cows that are always going to go. And then obviously half the heifers. So again, you could apply another selection pressure there. You could bring that down to maybe 27, 30 heifers, say, to bring in. But again, when we looked into it more, then we actually found that if we took out the poor performing cows, so them 26 cows in the herd, and kept the 54 heifers, we'd actually see an improvement in that between improved in calf rates and higher kilos of milk solids, a higher production. So essentially next year, well, all things going to plan, Joe's herd should be able to do 5% fat and 4% protein by using this option.
So fair enough, David. So you had 3 options there and you went with option 3. I suppose for David to go with option 3 is one thing, for you to accept it, Joe, is another thing. So Joe, you're okay with option 3 to sell the cows as long as you can get the cows off farm in the next week or two or sooner even?
The decision is made that this is our preferred option. The issue of finding somebody to buy the cows that are being sold are genuine cows, just not fitting the tight regime that we're trying to put together, probably is a bigger task maybe than we had thought it might be. It might be hard to sell late calvers at this time of the year, but we'll have to try and do something because I can't keep all the animals. I don't have facilities, I don't have slurry accommodation, and I don't have enough winter feed for them all, so something has to give. Our preference is to go with option 3 and sell the cows that don't fit the particular calving pattern that we're trying to put together here.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I suppose we see there on the slide that the better genetics will, heifers will be doing 460 in the first lactation, 560 as mature cows, and they will replace current cows doing 483 kilograms of mixed solids. I was interesting, Joe, from talking to you earlier today. I went and did some sums, so those cows that we are culling, they are on average about 6 kgs heavier than the ones staying behind. They're giving mixed solids per live weight. They're doing about 0.96, where the ones that are remaining are doing 1.1. So we're definitely getting rid of the cows that are not efficient, keeping the cows that are efficient, getting back in calf. We're really getting that herd that we really want to keep going forward. So I think that the better genetics is shown there. I suppose the cash flow, you're probably in a stage of your business where immediate cash flow is not necessary. You're not building a shed or anything it straight away, or you don't have big bills that you're later on in your in your development stage. And I suppose the tighter calving pattern giving you a better 6 week calf rate. Those why chase days of milk, why calf earlier?
There's a few things came up there, John, in what you said. The last time we spoke, we were talking about the efficiency of cows, and said the average cow in Ireland is about 0.8 kilos of milk solids per kilo of live weight. We weigh the cows here. We were happy to be heading towards 1, and I think, John, you've summed there, we're about 1.1 for the herd. Is that right, John? Kilos of milk solids. That's the average, with some of the younger cows way ahead of that. So we're always keeping an eye on kilos of milk solids per kilo of live weight. David was saying if we cull the cows that we would like to cull there, we should drive our kilos of milk solids per animal over 540 kgs. So if our cows are going under 500 kgs and our milk solids are going over 540, and we're heading for 1.2 kgs of milk solids per cow, and that's where we'd like to go to. These smaller cows producing more milk, we're here not only all the time we're looking at, everyone is telling us about sustainable farming, sustainable this and sustainable that, yet there's nobody looking in depth at these very efficient cows producing milk that is maybe 14 or 15% higher solids in it. We were talking about it earlier, John, before this web thing. If all the milk came from the cows that we're breeding, there would be 15% less transport required to transport the milk around the country. There'd be 15% less drying facilities required at the co-ops when the milk gets in there because of the higher solids in it. So we're talking about carbon footprint and sustainability. Maybe people should start looking at these little cows and see they're costing far less for their maintenance for their lifetime. I think myself and David discussed it earlier on, about €180 per year on 6 lactations is quite a lot of money. It's over €1,000 less to keep those cows for their lifetime. Maybe we should be looking at these. The longer this is going on, the more I like the cow that we're breeding. I think for the future, they've less carbon footprint, in my opinion. Maybe that's to be proved by science in time to come, but in my opinion they last longer and they're easier to mind. So now we're getting tighter calving patterns. There's a lower requirement for replacement rates coming in. That's a smaller carbon footprint again. And you put down there, why do we chase days in milk? Very simple. If you chase yield, you'll end up with cows that will lose too much body condition score, as our 2 New Zealand people said earlier on the web thing. Losing condition score early lactation is a recipe for lower conception rate. So chase days in milk, you'll get plenty production from these cows and you'll still get your conception rate. And down at the bottom there's more time to cycle before mating. As I said earlier on, we had a number of cows in the shed every year when we start the AI. This year, if we get the ones that we want to sell sold, we will end up with a month between finishing calving and starting AI. That's a great break for the cows. It's also a great break for Joe and Kathleen as well, which would be very welcome. And Whereas if you're calving up to the day of AI, when do you get a break? You don't, because the first 3 weeks of AI is busier than any of the calving, in my opinion, and requires a very detailed focus. I know the collars have helped, but breeding is a busy time, so you do need. It would be wonderful if we got a month of a break between calving and AI. I think it would be very good for the farm long term. Yeah.
Okay, so I think just to summarise before we go to questions and answers, I'm sure we're going to have loads of questions coming through. Pretty much, Joel, you're saying less fertiliser next year, less meal, less litres, more solids from grass and days and milk, which will result in less pressure on people in the business itself from a cash flow point of view, and the environment then as well. Would that be fair to say?
I'd say you summed it up very well there, John. Yeah, they're the things that we
Alright.
have that we've made. The reason we've made the decisions is to correct all those things that you've said there, John. Yes.
Beautiful. Let's go over to the questions and answers, and I think we'll be put to the test very soon. Okay, so to the very first question, there's aimed at you, Lucy. So only 44% of 2-year-old heifers meeting targets in New Zealand. Why do you think this is the case?
So I'm understanding that this is in relation to the number 44% on the slide, which was in looking at the number of second calvers that didn't meet targets. That's the only 44% that I can find on this slide, so I'm going to talk to that. So we think that this is because all the cows in the herd are often treated equally, even though the 2 and 3-year-olds have higher body condition score targets to meet because they're still growing. So 2-year-olds, the heifers that are coming in at first calving, they're often being set up well. They're well grown and they're meeting body condition score targets. But when they're put into a herd with older cows, they struggle to compete. There's hierarchies in cattle, so they're struggling to compete with older cows, and they're almost expected to perform the same, whereas they are still growing, so they will be prioritizing growth as from the energy that they're getting. And if they're not getting enough energy, meeting the energy demands, that difference will be met by losing condition. So that, coupled with being treated very similarly at the end of their first lactation, knowing that we've got a higher condition score target to meet when they come in for their second calving, and that they're often treated and dried off at the same time as the rest of the herd. Sometimes they've got a larger condition score gain to be met to meet those targets. So they're often coming in as a 3-year-old on the back foot, not meeting those calving targets. So while they still may be losing 1 condition score between calving as a 3-year-old, their second calving, and mating, they may still be meeting that less than 1 condition score target, but less than 1 condition score from a lower starting point will be a lower end point.
Okay, so Lucy, just to follow on from that answer, we are now coming towards the end of the lactation here in Ireland. First lactation heifers, what's the advice for farmers to do now? If because I'm sure that figure in New Zealand is probably reflected here in Ireland. Maybe it's not as bad, but I would have said that about New Zealand until I saw that figure. So
our recommendation is to dry off based on condition score and the expected calving dates. So utilizing those 2 numbers and dates to work out how much condition score they have to gain in a set time. We know that it takes about a month to gain condition score with, and they won't gain anything just before calving and just after they're dried off. So we can kind of put a time frame on, they will need this many days to gain this amount of condition. So it's more having dry off dates based on the cow rather than a set dry off date for everything. And it may be that the heifers need to be dried off earlier than the rest of the herd. Yes, you will miss out on some milk from those animals, but you should be setting them up to perform better the following year and stay in the herd, because they're not producing the same as a mature cow at the moment. So you could take a hit with their milk production now, which will help keep them in the herd for when they are producing their full capacity.
Yeah, I suppose if you dry them off now and get them in a good body condition score for calving in 2022 and their second lactation, you set them up from cycling that bit earlier, maybe for breeding in 2022, getting back in calf and staying in the herd for the 4 or 5 lactations.
Yes.
Good stuff. We'll move on to the second question, which is aimed at you, Joe. The question is, did you sell the Holsteins and buy grass-based cows in, or did you breed grass-based bulls onto the Holstein? This is coming from, you said the change of genetics in your herd has helped, or this comes from you saying, has there been a change of genetics in the herd, or has it been from slowly increasing the grass-based bulls within your herd? I imagine that question came from England.
Yeah, okay, John. It happened in 2 ways. First thing on, we were milking 70 Holstein cows. We kept those and bred them. Originally, we bred them to Kiwi Cross, which was a 50-50 Jersey Friesian. That was it wasn't a mistake, but it was a delay in improvement. We should have hit them with Jersey straight away, but we didn't. Farm came up for rent beside us. We had to buy stock, and we bought all crossbred stock at that stage. So our transition from high Holstein, where we are today, was 2-tier. We bred the Holsteins down by crossing them originally with Kiwi Cross, but most of the time with Jersey. And we bought in crossbreds that were coming from other herds, but we were particular about what we bought. So both have been successful. The stock we bought worked well for us, and the stock that we have bred from our Holsteins have worked well as well. But I will say the stock coming from the extreme Holsteins took 3 generations before the fertility of our breeding program kicked in properly.
Okay, good stuff. David, do you want to jump in there just on Joe's comment around using some Kiwi Cross bulls first and then deciding to use Jersey? Do you come across that much when you're out in the field?
Yeah, I suppose it's just that initial, move towards crossbreeding. I suppose maybe like that farmers would have went maybe with a Kiwi Cross, a high Jersey Kiwi Cross first. Would have probably saw an initial boost, but probably wouldn't get the full gain. I suppose a classic example that I'd see on farm maybe would be, I suppose in the past, using PSQ versus OKT. Like the PSQs are fantastic cows, but they're probably lacking that bit behind with the OKTs. It just shows the difference in using, say, a full Jersey when it comes to, say, across the Kiwi Cross. So like you might have a PSQ doing 540 kilos of milk solids, and you could have an OKT beside her doing 540. But there might be the bones of 30 or 40 kilos live weight in the difference, 1 point, and then the percentages. Like the OKT could be doing 5 fat and 4 protein, bringing it from the percentages, whereas that PSQ might be maybe down around that kind of 4.5, 4.6, or down around that 3.8, a bit more volume coming. I suppose it's just that kind of initial stimulus, just when you went for it first, you should nearly just go all in. You will see more genetic gain. I know it's hard to say at the start, but you will see more genetic gain and rapid increases in solids.
Yeah, you can see that already in the field. Next question goes towards you, Joe. So 460 kgs of milk solids for heifers and 560 kgs for mature cows is great production. What are you feeding them?
On the high stocking rate, John, we were hoping originally to target 500 kgs or less of concentrate, but because of our high stocking rate, we're generally heading for 700 kgs. Now we're reducing our stocking rate next year, and if weather comes right, we'd like to think we go under 500 kgs of concentrates per cow. On top of that, we will have more days in milk from the herd coming season. So a combination of slightly lower stocking rate and more days in milk, we should reach our target without, while we reduce our concentrate input by maybe 200, 250 kgs, depending on weather, of course. If we have a normal season, yes.
Yeah, that's actually that's phenomenal production of 700 kgs a meal. When you think of the board I had on the first board or the second board I had in Moore Park, where the average cow was doing 420 solids, mixed solids off about 1100 kilos a meal. It just really shows what happens when you have the right cow and the right grass going into them, what you can achieve. Joe, the next question comes from Robert, and is would you reconsider destocking if the milk price increase? So I suppose the question is, would you keep the cows if you thought the milk price was going to go up even further next year?
We've done well by having a high stocking rate, yes. The department don't like my stocking rate. I don't have the slurry accommodation. If I was to find maybe winter facilities near me that I could put 30 or 40 or 50 cows somewhere for the closed period, I wouldn't rule it out, John. No, I would not rule it out. But at the moment, the plan is to reduce down to 220 cows. So unless winter facility come up near me, I'd say we will go ahead with that plan, yes. It puts the farm under too much pressure during the drier summers. And we were always conscious of 1, 3, and 6 grass costs. One, doesn't matter what that one is, conserved feed. And I would actually put zero grazed grass in as conserved feed as well. It's 3 times dearer than grass, and then concentrate 6 times dearer. So when you shove your stocking rate up, you're going to be either buying in some conserved feed or you're going to be buying concentrates, and both of them are much, much dearer than grazed grass.
Okay, just this next question, I think they might have missed the point when you made about the colour. So they've asked for heat detection. Are you using wearables, tail paint, or patches? And do you want to also just touch on that point about when you do discuss the colours, your decision just to go all out colours and not to, I suppose, do heat detection as well?
Okay, well, for quite a number of years, we were firstly we were doing tail painting. I remember there's 250 cows with very little labour on only myself and my wife, so we don't have surplus labour hanging around with paint brushes in our hands. So anything that's done on the farm is done by ourselves. And I alluded to that the first few weeks of breeding is extremely busy time. Touching up tail paint became impossible for us to get it done. So we were milking and trying to AI as well. So the last few years, before this year, we were using the LIC heat patches, or I call them the bubbles. And they were working well, but once they were on 3 weeks, they really did need to be replaced. They do become loose. The hair, at the time of breeding, the cow is shedding her hair. She's going from her winter coat to her summer coat. And there's no point in saying it do get loose. And now it worked well, but you were all the time working on them, you were all the time touching them up. And in a farm where labour is scarce, it was another job that had to be done. This year, then, we decided to look at colours, and we jumped in. So we purchased the colours, and we were going to put on the bubbles or the heat patches as well. And then I said, to hell with it. I said, I'm not after spending that amount of money and going to as well put on heat patches. So we said, we trust the colours. We had them on for a couple of months before breeding season, and we got confidence in them. And first time ever, we done, the day before we started breeding, we had 5 cows calved 22 days or more that had not come cycling. We got the vet to look at them. As it turns out, they were coming cycling anyway, but they just hadn't come cycling. So that gave us great confidence. The cows were set up right. There wasn't a whole lot of cows non-cycling. There wasn't, when he handled the 5 that needed to be handled, they weren't dirty, there was no cysts or anything like that. So we had great confidence going into the breeding season, and the collars worked very well for us. Yes, they did. Okay, so well, so well that we've now sold our bulls and won't be using bulls anymore on the farm.
So all bulls off farm. So health and
So it's
safety
going to
thing
be
there.
all AI from now on. Yes.
All right, good stuff. Any intervention, Joe, used in the breeding cows? Example like fixed time AI.
No, we anyone who has been on the farm, we prefer to breed a herd that there's no intervention. So we use no intervention this year, and that's the way I'd like to set it up. Now, just to clarify before anyone starts ringing in and giving out, we do synchronize our heifers, maybe because of the fact that they're away from the farm and they're with a contract rearer. We do synchronize. Our system for synchronization is probably different to some people's. We one shot of estimate, about 60% of them will come within 4 days, and those that haven't come, so there's 40% of them would probably would end up getting a cedar, but that gives us exceptionally good conception rate on that, and it's not too expensive. My preference is that we use all AI and no intervention on anything. That would be my preference going forward. I myself have a personal thing. I think we're beginning to, some, not all, but some are beginning to rely on hormone treatments to improve the fertility, and we really shouldn't be doing that. We should be breeding fertile cows that'll go on calf without any intervention.
Yeah. Okay, so and the next question then, Joe, how long do you leave the tin cows on once a day, and when do you start doing once a day?
Usually from the day they get lame, because the tin ones, lameness and body condition kind of go hand in hand. So particularly if a young animal gets lame, and we do have some lameness. I think anyone who has numbers has some lameness. We'd be very exact on just the minute we see them lame, put them on once a day and put them on the paddock beside it does two things. It looks after them body condition wise, and it stops them walking on the farm roadways as well. And so the minute we see it, so they're there from the minute they get a sore foot, they're pulled out and put there. Now, some of them might be only there for 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 days, and some of them could be there for the entire breeding season.
Okay, fair enough. I'll give you a break there for a second, Joe.
Okay.
Lucy, this anonymous person says, my cows always lose body condition score. Is it possible to meet the nutritional needs of freshly calved cows to top them up if they're losing weight post-calving? And if it is possible, how so?
So there's sort of two things there. Setting them up well, making sure that they are meeting their targets prior to calving will help, but we do expect them to lose condition. So when a cow's heavily pregnant, the calf takes up so much room in the stomach, in the belly of the cow, that the stomach, the rumen, shrinks in size. So our cows here have about a 200 litre rumen capacity, and I think that shrinks by about 60%. So there's a period of time when after the calf's born that the rumen has to get back to its full capacity. So at that time, we're not expecting that the cow is going to be able to eat enough feed, particularly in New Zealand, because we are so pasture based, that she's not going to be able to fit enough feed into her smaller stomach to meet those demands of early lactation. So we are expecting a loss of condition. Of course, we see cows that don't lose much or any at all, but I don't think that there's a magic silver bullet for that. I think it's setting them up well and understanding that we do expect them to have a loss. We just want to minimize that loss.
Okay, fair enough. Next question, Joe. Could Joe see himself moving more towards a purebred Jersey cow? And has he tried any sex semen? And then the second part of that question is, have you used any beef semen, and where's the market for those calves? So I suppose the second part of that question, the beef semen and the market for the calves. you sold those beef calves that I saw in your yard. They went to Castlemark. And then I suppose the first part of that question, would you move towards a purebred Jersey cow, Joe?
The answer, for me, one of the big pluses to crossbreeding is hybrid vigor. We were with purebred Holsteins and all the issues that came with that. Purebred doesn't attract me at the moment. I think crossbred is, I like the hybrid vigor. I like the hardiness. We have, I see people with dogs around, purebred dogs are in the vet every day. The mongrel, you kick him out of your way and he's there for 10 years and he's never sick and he seems to be immune to worms and everything else that the purebred dogs have to get. And to be fair, but I think cows are the same. I like my mongrel cows. They're hardy, they're easy mind. Purebred doesn't attract me. Now, I know you get extreme solids with purebred Jerseys, but I think the hardiness would be lost. And I would see it as not for me. No, we like an easier mind cow, I think. Now, I'm saying that I have never had purebred Jerseys, so I don't want to be criticizing purebred Jerseys because I never had them, but they don't attract me and I won't be going that way at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. And then that question around sex semen.
Sex semen, I think anyone who knows me knows I had strong opinions on sex semen, which was when you have a fertility problem, you don't use it, right? And the people who don't have fertility problems don't need to use it. And that's the way I stuck up to now. I think, yeah, sure, I'd say my arm would be twisted to use some to come in season without a doubt. If you have a serious fertility problem, I think you shouldn't be using it because if any semen is going to let you down, it'll be sex semen. It can be hit and miss. You want to be sure your fertility is good. Now, the other thing about using sex semen is, and I think there's a bit of data coming around that, the collars will tell you whereabouts she is in her heat. It's probably easier for me to use sex semen now with the collars, with the information that you throw out. I know when they're going off heat, I know how long they've been in heat, and I know they've had previous heats in the previous 21 and the 21 days before that again. So that would encourage me to mean that I have enough information there to use some sex semen. I will use some this year. I won't go mad.
Yeah, I suppose that's...
I hope LIC will have it. I hope it'll be priced right, John, this year. Do you hear me?
We'll look after you, Joe. We'll knock 50 cents off the price for you. So I suppose that's the thing we've always advocated in LIC with sex semen. It comes with a health warning. You have to have everything else right before you decide to use sex semen. David, do you want to jump in there? I've seen you being a poster right there in Agriland yesterday for it. So you want to just share your experience with the collars and with sex semen, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose just from seeing results on farm throughout the country, I suppose with the use of collars, it does make things extremely easier. Like you have everything there on paper, you have all your pre-breeding data, you have the time she started, or from when she started bulling, I suppose, and you know exactly the ideal time for insemination. So I suppose from the data we're coming through now, the ideal timing is that around that 14 to 22 hour period. I wouldn't use it on first calvers. Just the data coming back from ST now and on farm, it just doesn't work well on first calvers. And look, it backs up Lucy's data there, like if 44% of first calvers aren't in the ideal condition, they're not the cows you want to put in sex semen into. So like ideally you kind of want to target them cows that are, I suppose, 2 to 6 lactations, ideally calf in the first 6 weeks, but look, at least have had one cycle. Maybe two ideally, but at least one anyway. And are looking in that positive body condition score. I looked at the farmers who are following them guidelines and getting close, if not better, than a conventional semen conception rate. So,
yeah, okay. There's a couple of questions that kind of have the same theme running through it. So, Joe, the question is based on that comment where you went with a Kiwi cross first and then Jersey. People are asking, why did you go a Kiwi cross first rather than Jersey? Some people have suggested that is it because you had a high litre cow, 7,000 litre cow, and that you prefer to put a Kiwi cross on it rather than a Jersey? So if you just want to talk through that decision to use Kiwi cross before using Jersey, was that the right decision, the wrong decision, or why was the decision made at the time?
Well, we had extreme Holsteins, and we had them classified, and they classified very well, and we had up to excellent 94 cows. It is a massive decision to say you put a jersey on them. So to break the ice, we went half jersey as a kind of a step in the toe in the water. But then when they started to milk, we realised that we should have gone jersey on those extreme Holsteins, and they would have given us fantastic cows. So purely lack of confidence in jumping into the crossbreeding ring. That's really why we went half-hearted at it. Now, my experience talking to guys, if you have British Friesian cows, you don't go jersey on them. You're better off to go Kiwi Cross. That the milk can be a bit disappointing if you go jersey first time on British Friesians. These are the old type British Friesian cow that maybe would be prone to going dry in September once the weather gets a little bit chilly. But my own experience is we had loads of milk in the cows. We could have gone jersey and they would have made great cows. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I'll give you a rest here now, Joe. I'll aim this one at you, guys. Guys, other than fertility performance, is there evidence that body condition score at calving will protect or improve milk production?
Yes, that's definitely true. So you get the double whammy with meeting body condition score targets, is you'll get more production post-calving in the following season, and the cows are in better body condition scores, and you get better fertility as well. So body condition score targets are set on the optimal. You can go high. If you go fatter, you will get more production the following season, but then it's not so good for reproduction. So the optimal for increase in milk production is actually a slightly higher body condition score than optimal for reproduction. So the targets are set on the balance of the two.
Okay, fair enough. Joe, next question. We spoke about the smaller cow, getting that efficiency at 1.1. How small is too small? Where's your happy place?
I don't know. I remember the head of LIC came over, and I cannot think of his name at the moment, came over one time to speak to us when that's about 10 years ago. And somebody said, what's the ideal cow? And he said, a cow that will produce 1.1 times her body weight from grass. So I don't think, I'm not going to get hooked up on what size. It's their efficiency. I'd say we'll try and push as far as we can on kilos of solids per kilo of live weight from grass. It's from grass that I forgot to put in. That's so important, because a Holstein cow will produce 1.2 times, but you'll be getting 3 tons of meal doing that. I mean, that's not what I mean. I'm talking about from very little concentrated feeding. I would say we probably stay around the 480 to 500 kgs. I would imagine that's where the cows will stay. We have smaller cows and we like them a lot. So I'm not hooked up about what size or what weight they are. It's not hugely concerning me at the minute. I'm watching their efficiency more so than their weight.
Yeah. So a couple of questions coming in here around the bulls used for the coming season. So if you want just to touch base, I suppose both Joe and David, about the bulls for the coming season, how long the breeding season is, and what beef breeds do you use?
Well, I'll get Dave to do the bulls, but I'll talk about how I pick my bulls, and I won't name bulls because I'm hopeless. I can never think of their names anyway. But the few things I insist on when I'm picking a bull, right? Body depth. I won't compromise on it. I don't like milk and sausages. I want deep-bodied cows. I want good rump structure. I don't like high pins. We don't use bulls with high pins. I like up to now, we've used exclusively daughter-proven bulls. And for the past good few years, and this is kind of a thing that it's not, there's probably no science to it, I use all A2 milk bulls. There's probably just in case it's important down the line, but at the moment it's not, but it could be down the line, I don't know. But for the past good few years, we've been using all A2 bulls. They would be the characteristics I'd like to have in the cow. Then I get somebody from LIC to pick the bulls that have the highest genetic merit. They can do the figures on them. They know what I want. I want deep bodies, good rump structure. I also want tidy udders, and they have to be A2. And then whatever the top bulls at that is the bulls I use every year. And that's what they pick.
Perfect. Just before we go to David, regarding which actual bulls they are, so do you breed from all your cows, or do you select which cows you breed from?
Up to now, we've been breeding from them all. Yes. We have a 12-week breeding period. We use maybe 7 weeks or 8 weeks where we use dairy, and then we switch to Angus bulls and Angus AI. This year we use a little bit of Belgian blue just to see what happens. I haven't had any Belgian blues out of the jerseys yet. We've had some Herefords, and we've had mostly Anguses.
Okay.
But Belgian blue will be coming in the springtime, so we'll see how we go on with that.
So I suppose, David, if you comment on the bulls in the past and what bulls you will be recommending for the coming AI season next year.
Yeah, so I suppose with the heifers, Joe uses all Jersey semen on the heifers. I suppose that's just from an easy calving point of view. So the last 2 years, Misty and Dexter would have been put across the whole group of heifers. This year it was Haas, just I suppose to avoid, say, inbreeding from someone coming Dexter daughters coming through. Then across the cows then. So last year, the team would have been made up of Sierra, Proclaimer, Springfield, Misty on them Heil Holsteins that are still in the herd, and Slipstream. I just saw a comment there. Do you use any, or no, is it all Kiwi Cross and Kiwi Cross bulls? Yeah, so last year was the first year there's actually no Frisian bull in Joe's panel. I suppose it was Joe was looking.
It's your fault.
Yeah,
that's your fault, David. That's your fault.
So yeah, I managed to convince Joe not to use him because I just didn't feel he needed him, especially just targeting that kilo live per kilo solid. Then I suppose for the coming year, probably won't be much of a change. The heifers will also get Jersey. They might get Haas, or there's a new Jersey bull coming through now, Banff. Then I suppose with regard to the cows, Sierras will be used, Proclaimers will be used, Springfield and Slipstream. Premonition will probably be brought in. So he's a FH8, seems to be the top Kiwi Cross bull that came through in the proven bulls, I suppose, in the 18 codes this year. So he'll be added to the team, and there might be one or two crossbreds or even a Frisian bull added to the mix again this year. Just depends how to go. I suppose we haven't sat down and gone through bulls yet, but just going on last year, that seems to be what the flavour of the bulls is. We will be for this year.
Just a few questions around picking those bulls in. Hopefully in January 2022, and it's only two and a half months time, we'll be running a webinar on our new bulls. We will have maybe Joe's herd or somebody else's herd, where we will say these are the bulls we're picking, and these are the bulls we're picking over certain cows and why we're doing it. So a lot of those questions, guys, will be answered through then. David, this week we will know what bulls for definite are coming into Ireland with the asterisk mark, subject to biology and passing tests in 2 weeks' time, on around the 10th of November, the 12th of November. We will know which bulls have passed the semen quality test for sexing. So from after the date of about the 12th of November, get on the phone, ring David or ring your breeding advisor, and they will know what bulls that are available. And that should answer a few of the questions there. And we do also have more forward bulls coming through than what was announced a few weeks ago. So yeah, we put out an article a couple of weeks ago that just highlighted 3 of the bulls. We have 10 bulls bought this year, and we also still have our 8 bulls from last year. So there's 18 bulls there, plenty of option. Friesians, crossbreds, jerseys. So what you need, we have them there. Last year's bulls, the 2020 crop, will all be available sexed here in Ireland, using the exact same technology as we used in New Zealand. So that's that question there. Let me see. Joe, what do you have to get right every day, every month, every year for your success?
The cow has to have enough to eat every day of every month. It's very, very important. A few things that we became aware of. The farm we went across the road, we have to hold the cows before we let them out. We found that if you're given 12-hour breaks, which we do when grass is scarce, and grass has been scarce quite a number of times the last 2 years because of drought, if the cows, and this might go back to Joyce and Lucy's thing as well, if we're milking the cows and they're going directly to the paddock on a 12-hour split, we find that the young cows are going out last, and the cows who need the most are getting the least. And if you do that for a good bit of the summer, you'll find that the body condition score young animals. We found that if we're forced because of grazing, scarcity of grass, to use 12-hour breaks, we find that it's best to let the herd out together. Now, people mightn't agree with that, but that's what we found, that the young animals don't suffer. If you go and look at our body condition score, quite a number of animals gained weight between calving and AI, and that's quite unusual. But that's because they all went to the paddock when we were scarce in grass together. No cow was ever hungry for any more than a few hours, and that's not simple to do. That takes a lot of work and a lot of eyeball and a lot of listening to your cows and stay watching them, I think, is very important. To no point in finding out they've lost a half body condition score a month after they lose it. You want to be watching their behaviour and get to know your cows, I think, is very important.
Yeah, nothing simple about a simple grass-based system. Eh? Last question, Joe. So wrapping it up soon. Comes from Simon Breen down the road. What will be the stocking rate for 220 cows next year?
3.2.
Okay, lovely stuff. So I think, okay, I just marked that one off, and so that wraps up the questions there for this evening. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank a few people. So I'll start off with Cork Grassland Services. Joe, you agree, they're easy to work with, very obliging, coming on a Saturday morning during milking, got the job done most mornings before 8:15, and on the last morning, fairness to Cork Grassland Services, Tim and John Paul put up with me vaccinating 200 and something cows for salmonella. So very obliging. You couldn't ask for any more than that. Patients are waiting for me to vaccinate the cows. So I think a very good job there with them. So I want to thank them, and I want to put in the plug there for them, because when guys do a good job, they deserve it.
I back you up on that one, John. Yeah, and just from my point of view, early on people were saying, thanking me for body condition scoring and weighing and all that. It's absolutely brilliant to get information and then to put it into the hands of Lucy and Joyce, and they play with it and give you back figures that show that the work being done in Teagasc isn't made up, that body condition score, when it's done right, you will get the proper results. And if you watch those graphs that the girls put up there, it's brilliant to see that the herd reflected all the information coming from Teagasc and themselves. And it's lovely to see it. And it makes the herd, that information makes you know that you're doing a thing right. And if you know you're doing it right, then you'll also know when you're doing it wrong. So thanks very much to everybody who put that information together for me.
Yeah, I second that, Lewis and Joyce. Just very simply, thank you very much for all your effort that you put into this webinar. It's greatly appreciate it. And David Power, thanks very much for your effort here tonight. And it's just great working with you, because when someone asks me a question, I have to find a piece of paper or an email or a document. But when you ask David Power, it's all in his head. He just has that information. And it's shown again tonight.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, he's fierce. So thanks, David. Joe and Kathleen, a massive thank you to you and for the effort you put in. I think, you spoke about the data there, Joe. I think we're gone from a place where I used to ring you and I go, Joe, I need certain data, and you go, John, when am I going to get the time to get this data for you to probably a place now where you'd roll your eyes when you're doing that, even though I can't see you, I know you're doing it. But now when I call you looking for that data, you'll go, what day suits? You see the value in it, and you're more coming, I suppose, you see the value on it, and it's just rather than I'm blurting out something that's coming from Tagus or from New Zealand, you say, well, actually, no, this is going to lead somewhere. So thanks, Joe, for your patience in the starting, getting that done, and to Colleen as well.
Okay. My pleasure. And if anybody wants to contact me, they're more than welcome. Yeah, okay. Thanks, John.
No problem. And last question to you, Joe. From me, several years ago in Agriland, you had an article that said you did you wanted a cow that can do over 500 milk solids per cow, good fertility, easy care. Has LIC delivered on that promise?
Yeah, the stock cows delivered. Yeah, the one that was said on that day was that you could breed a 9% solid herd, which would be 5 and 4. I didn't actually believe you could, but I think we're within a year or maybe 2 years of having a 5 and 4 solids herd, which would be 5 fat and 4 protein. And if I get there with good fertility, we'd have ticked all the boxes.
Yeah, thanks very much.
So
I think that perfect. That wraps up tonight. If you want to see this webinar again, we have it recorded and we'll be releasing it again in about 3 or 4 days. Also, we'll be releasing it in a podcast version. For more info and insight from LIC, check out our website, lic.ie, or watch out for our publication, Grassroots. And our next webinar will be on the 17th of November, which will be about milking frequencies. So we will be discussing in that webinar 3 and 2 milkings, 10 and 7, once a day, the different options. We will have Brent Bryce, who's our guru in from New Zealand, and we will have Steve Davis, who literally wrote the paper on what happens to others when you go to once a day, and it's actually very insightful. From LIC here in Ireland and across Europe, thank you for listening, whether it's from Ireland, UK, or mainland Europe, or further afield. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar and have learned something useful to apply in your own farm. Thank you, good night, and take care.